President Biden will be in Pennsylvania today. He'll be just outside of Scranton this afternoon, where he's expected to argue that Democrats, not Republicans, are the real law and order party, highlighting the recent violent rhetoric surrounding federal law enforcement from some members of the Republican Party. He will also tout his administration's, quote, Safer America plan, which calls for increased funding and training for 100,000 new police officers. He is also expected to talk about money from the American Rescue Plan that local governments have used for law enforcement, as well as the bipartisan gun safety law. Then on Thursday, President Biden will hold a primetime address on, quote, the soul of the nation. The president will speak at Independence Hall in Philadelphia, where he's expected to lay out his argument that America's freedoms and democracy are at stake, something he argued when he first announced his presidential run.
We are in a battle for the soul of the nation. Everything that's made America America is at stake. Limited to 4 years, history will treat this as an aberration. But if there's 8 years of this administration, I think it will forever and fundamentally change the character and the trajectory of this nation.
A White House official tells NBC News, quote, he will make clear who is fighting for those rights, fighting for those freedoms, and fighting for our democracy. Joining us now, NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli. He's in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, ahead of Biden's address there today. And Mike, give us a sense of how the president is really framing his accomplishments and putting them in perspective with what this country has been through over the past 4 to 6 years.
Well, Mika, obviously, we've been talking about these midterm elections for months, but this is a White House that understands that it's when students return back to the classroom with Labor Day approaching that most Americans are really for the first time tuning into this question that's before them in November about who's going to control Congress and governorships across the country. And so even if President Biden isn't necessarily going to be campaigning with every Democrat across the country, you're really seeing now ramp up his efforts to frame the debate, frame the discussion for the country as the midterms approach. And as a top Biden political advisor laid out to me, there's really a two-track strategy here for the president. The first, he understands that kitchen table issues, the economy, concerns about inflation are going to be one of the top issues this fall. And he's going to talk about promises made and promises kept, talk about the American Rescue Plan, the infrastructure law, the CHIPS Act, some of these recent real string of wins that really Democrats feel gives them a real story to tell this fall. But then you have a second track, which is the concern about the fact that Americans' rights and freedoms are at stake, are at risk here, have been taken away here. And the reemergence, or maybe it's better to say the persistent presence of Donald Trump, has really, in the view of the president's advisors, given Democrats a real gift here. Politics 101 is that if you're the party in power, if you control, as Democrats do, the White House, the Senate, you want to make the midterm elections a choice between two parties, not a referendum on what they've done here. And the looming shadow of Donald Trump, the way he's shaped the candidates who are on the ballot this fall, has allowed President Biden really to do a rerun of his 2020 campaign strategy, to talk about the fact that this is, as he so often put it, a continued battle for the soul of America. So you'll see him do that today. Just outside Scranton, trying to flip the script here on this law and order message, talk about the fact that Democrats have boosted funding for law enforcement, that they are, you'll hear him say a version of what he has also said recently, that you can't be pro-insurrection and pro-cops. And then, of course, outside of the Independence Hall in Philadelphia, returning to the city where the Declaration of Independence was signed, to talk about that founding principles that are at stake in this election. Talking about the soul of America. And as the president has so often said, our standing in the world, our democracy is at stake. And as you said, he'll lay out who's fighting for those freedoms and who's on the other side of this fight.
All right, Mike Memoli, thank you so much. Greatly appreciated. Soul of America, of course, trademarked by John Meacham. Any use of that term without the express written consent of John Meacham is strictly prohibited. Or maybe not. Maybe it's okay if a president uses it. Katty Kay. You know, it's fascinating. We would say here, and I think most political analysts would say, if you just speak generally about democracy, saving freedom, That's the sort of thing that doesn't reach voters the way pocketbook issues reach voters. Talking about inflation, the cost of groceries, the cost of gas, the cost of education. But obviously, things have changed so dramatically. And let's go back to Dobbs, where a right to privacy, a right for a woman to make a decision over her health, over her body, over her future, has been taken away after 50 years. Suddenly, there's a real concern because of what Thomas wrote in a concurring opinion, that could extend to one right to privacy after another right to privacy. Nothing guaranteed. And suddenly, the White House sees the political upside of giving this sort of speech. I guess it really shows you how dramatically things have changed in the last 3 or 4 months.